It was supposed to be just another night for the Rat Pack. The lights were ready. The band knew the order. The jokes were already written in everyone's head. But something was off. Not on stage, backstage. A look that lasted too long, a name that wasn't called when it should have been, and a silence that didn't belong in a room full of friends. Frank Sinatra noticed it immediately. He didn't react. He didn't say a word. He didn't protect anyone. Not yet. Because Sinatra understood something most people didn't. When betrayal comes from inside the room, noise only makes it stronger. Stay until the end, because the final decision in this story changed more than one career. And before we begin, tell us where you're watching from. Las Vegas had rules in those days. Some were written, most were not. On stage, the Rat Pack looked untouchable. Off stage, every smile carried weight, every invitation mattered, and every omission meant something. That night, Sammy Davis Jr. was still laughing, still performing, still trusting the room he thought he knew. Frank Sinatra was already watching someone else. Not an enemy, not the press, not the crowd, a friend. And that's when the story truly began. Backstage at the Sands never felt casual to Frank Sinatra, no matter how many times he walked those corridors. The laughter, the clinking glasses, the music bleeding through the walls, all of it was just surface noise. What mattered was what people didn't say, who waited too long to speak, who avoided eye contact, who smiled a second too late. That night started like any other. Same venue, same crowd, same names printed neatly on the schedule. But Sinatra noticed the shift before anyone else did. He always did. It wasn't a mistake, and it wasn't dramatic enough for anyone to complain. It was subtle, almost polite. Sammy Davis Jr.'s name had been moved. Not removed, not canceled, just delayed. Sinatra stared at the schedule for a moment longer than necessary. The order still worked on paper. The show would flow. The audience would never know the difference. That's why it was dangerous. Changes like this were never made for the audience. They were made for the people watching from the shadows. "Who approved this?" Sinatra asked, his voice calm, almost uninterested. A producer standing nearby answered quickly, too quickly. "Minor adjustment, Frank. Keeps things smooth." Sinatra looked at him. Smooth for who? The producer hesitated, then forced a smile. For everyone. That answer told Sinatra everything. When people stopped naming names, it meant someone powerful was involved. Sinatra folded the schedule and slipped it into his jacket pocket, already done with the conversation. If this was intentional, and it was, he wanted to see how far it would go. Sammy, meanwhile, was exactly where he always was, laughing with the band, trading jokes, keeping the room light. He hadn't seen the schedule yet, and Sinatra didn't warn him, not because he didn't care, but because warning someone too early changed how they moved. Sinatra needed Sammy to stay exactly as he was. The show began without friction. Sinatra took the stage, effortless as ever. The audience leaned in, comfortable, trusting him completely. From their seats, everything looked perfect. But Sinatra's eyes kept drifting toward the wings, toward the timing he knew was wrong. Sammy was supposed to follow him. He didn't. Minutes passed, not long enough for panic, just long enough for intention. Sinatra felt it settle in his chest, that quiet certainty that something was unfolding behind the curtain. When Sammy finally appeared, the applause was loud, warm, forgiving. The crowd loved him, but love didn't protect you backstage. When Sammy came off stage, his smile lingered for a moment before fading. He spotted Sinatra immediately. "Frank," he said, lowering his voice, "did I miss something?" Sinatra studied him carefully. What did it feel like? Sammy shrugged, uneasy. Like I showed up late to my own party? Sinatra nodded once. That's about right. Who did that? Sammy asked. He didn't sound angry, just alert. Sinatra didn't answer. He glanced around the room instead. A few people had gathered near the back, watching, waiting. No one looked surprised. That was the part that mattered. Not tonight, Sinatra finally said. Tonight we watch. Sammy frowned. Watch what? Sinatra's voice stayed even. Who thinks you won't notice? Sammy let out a quiet breath. You think this was on purpose? Sinatra met his eyes. Nothing this small ever is. They didn't argue. They didn't confront anyone. The rest of the night passed without incident. No raised voices, no scenes. But the damage had already been done. Someone had tested the room, and Sinatra knew better than to assume it would stop there. As they left backstage, Sammy slowed his pace. You ever seen this before? Sinatra paused. Plenty of times. And how does it end? Sinatra adjusted his jacket and glanced back at the corridor one last time. Depends how patient the wrong person thinks I am. That night ended quietly, too quietly, and that's how Sinatra knew it wasn't over. The second night was never going to look dramatic from the outside. That was the point. Sinatra understood this better than anyone. Real power didn't announce itself twice. It waited to see who noticed the first time. Las Vegas buzzed as usual. Tourists poured through the casino floors, unaware that upstairs, in places they would never see, reputations were being measured in inches and seconds. Sinatra arrived earlier than normal that evening, not because he was anxious, but because he wanted to watch the room before it knew it was being watched. He didn't go straight to his dressing room. Instead, he lingered near the edge of the backstage area, greeting people casually, asking questions that sounded harmless. How long had they worked here? Who was handling the stage order tonight? Had anything changed since yesterday? The answers were polite, vague, careful. That was confirmation. Sammy arrived shortly after, still upbeat, still carrying himself with the confidence of someone who believed talent was protection enough. Sinatra watched him closely. The laughter came easily, but it didn't last as long. Sammy was listening more than he was talking now. Once you noticed something was wrong, you couldn't unnotice it. You see it too, don't you? Sammy said quietly when they were alone for a moment. Sinatra nodded. They want you to feel like you're guessing. Well, it's working, because I am. That's fine. Guessing keeps you alive. Certainty gets you sloppy. They were interrupted by a familiar voice, one of the men who had been present the night before, not a performer, not management, but someone who seemed to float between both worlds. Gentlemen, the man said smoothly, good to see you both. Sinatra smiled. Always is. The man's eyes lingered on Sammy for just a second too long. Sammy, you're on earlier tonight. Sammy blinked. Earlier? Small shuffle, nothing personal. Sinatra stepped in casually. Funny, yesterday he was late, today he's early. The man chuckled. Coincidence. Sinatra held his gaze. That's a lot of coincidence for 1 week. The man's smile didn't fade, but something behind it hardened. Vegas runs on timing, Frank. You know that. I do. That's why I'm paying attention. The man excused himself shortly after, leaving a silence behind him that felt intentional. Sammy exhaled slowly. You still think this is testing? Sammy asked. Sinatra didn't answer right away. He watched the man disappear into the crowd. No, he said finally. This is shaping.
The show went on, but the energy was different. Sinatra noticed small things most people would miss, the way certain people positioned themselves backstage, the way conversation stopped when Sammy walked past, the way a few laughs sounded forced, Not nervous, but calculated. On stage, Sammy delivered as always. The audience loved him. They always did. But when he stepped off, no one congratulated him. No pats on the back. No easy praise. That absence was louder than applause. Later that night, Sinatra and Sammy sat in Sinatra's dressing room. The door was closed. The noise outside was distant. "Let me ask you something," Sammy said. "If this keeps going, what happens?" Sinatra poured himself a drink, but didn't touch it. "Then someone's gonna have to decide what kind of room this is." Sammy frowned. "Meaning? Meaning whether this is a room where talent speaks or a room where people get moved around to make someone else feel bigger." Sammy leaned back. "And if it's the second one?" Sinatra finally picked up his glass. "Then it stops being our room." There was a knock at the door. Sinatra didn't answer immediately. He waited, timing again. Then, "Come in." The door opened. The same man from earlier stepped inside, closing the door behind him. "Hope I'm not interrupting." "You are," Sinatra said calmly, "but go ahead." The man smiled. "I just wanted to make sure everything's all right." Sammy crossed his arms. "You keep checking on me, makes a guy wonder." The man raised his hands, "Just making sure everyone's comfortable." Sinatra laughed softly. "Comfortable people don't get rearranged." The man looked at Sinatra now. "Frank, nobody's trying to cause trouble." "Good, because trouble has a way of remembering names." The man hesitated. "You reading too much into this." Sinatra leaned forward slightly. "And you're not reading enough." The silence stretched. The man adjusted his tie. "Look, things are changing. New interests, new priorities." "New respect?" Sammy asked. The man avoided his eyes. "Different respect." Sinatra stood, not aggressively, just enough to change the dynamic. "Let me be clear," he said. "Whatever game you're playing, Sammy isn't a piece." The man swallowed. "No one said he was." Sinatra stepped closer, then stopped moving him. The man exhaled. "It's not that simple." Sinatra nodded. "It never is." The man left shortly after, his confidence dulled but not broken. Sammy watched the door close. "So now what?" Sammy asked. Sinatra sat back down. "Now we wait." "For what?" "For the mistake," Sinatra replied. "They always make one." The third night was the most dangerous, and Sinatra knew it before he arrived. Patterns don't repeat exactly, they escalate. The room felt heavier, fewer jokes, more glances. Sammy's name appeared on the schedule in its original place, a concession, not an apology. "That's it?" Sammy asked. "We win?" Sinatra shook his head. "No, this is the calm." Sure enough, the pressure returned in a different form. A missing introduction, a shortened applause cue. Nothing overt, everything deniable. After the show, Sammy confronted Sinatra quietly. "They're trying to make me doubt myself." Sinatra met his eyes. "Are you?" Sammy smiled thinly. "No." "Good," Sinatra said, "because that's all they want." Later that night, Sinatra was approached by someone else, someone older, someone who didn't pretend to be neutral. "You've got a problem," the man said bluntly. Sinatra raised an eyebrow. "I have a few." "This one's not small," the man continued. "You're protecting him." Sinatra nodded. "I am." "You don't have to," the man said. Sinatra smiled. "That's where you're wrong." The man sighed. "You're turning this into a line." Sinatra's expression hardened slightly. "It already is. You just didn't know which side you were standing on." The man studied him for a long moment. "You willing to make this public?" Sinatra shook his head. "No." "Good," the man said, "because that would get ugly." Sinatra's smile returned, calm and steady. "I don't need ugly. I need finished." That night ended like the others.
No fights, no scenes, no headlines. But something had shifted. People were more careful now. Words were chosen more slowly. Eyes avoided Sinatra's longer than before. Sammy noticed it too. "They're scared," he said. Sinatra nodded. "Good. Of who?" Sinatra finished his drink. Of what happens when the wrong silence breaks. As they left the building, Sammy stopped. "You ever going to tell me who started this?" Sinatra looked out toward the lights of Vegas. "When it's over. And if it never ends?" Sinatra smiled faintly. "Then it means we weren't patient enough." The third night was coming. And this time, Sinatra wasn't just watching. He was ready.
"That's new," Sinatra muttered. After the show, Sinatra sought out one of the older figures backstage, a man who had survived longer than most by saying very little. "You see that?" Sinatra asked. The man nodded. "I did." "Who was it?" The man hesitated. "Someone sending a message." Sinatra studied him. "To who?" The man met his gaze. "To you." Sinatra's expression didn't change. "Good. That means they're done pretending this is about Sammy." The man frowned. "You're pulling attention." Sinatra shrugged. "That's what I do." Back in the dressing room, Sammy paced. "This isn't just about stage order anymore." "No," Sinatra agreed. "It's about control." "Then why not end it?" Sammy asked. "Why keep dragging this out?" Sinatra looked at him carefully. "Because if I end it the wrong way, it doesn't end. It just changes faces." There was a knock at the door. This time, Sinatra didn't delay. "Come in." The door opened, revealing a man neither of them had seen before. He wore an expensive suit and carried himself with the confidence of someone used to being obeyed. "Frank Sinatra," the man said. "We haven't been properly introduced." Sinatra gestured to a chair. "You're standing." The man smiled tightly. "Fair enough. I'll be brief." Sammy crossed his arms. "I'll listen." The man glanced at Sammy, then back at Sinatra. "Things have become complicated." Sinatra nodded. "They usually do when people start moving others around." The man sighed. "This doesn't have to turn into something unpleasant." Sinatra tilted his head. "Funny. That's what people say right before it does." The man's tone sharpened. "You're protecting him." "Yes," Sinatra replied simply. "And you don't have to." "Yes," Sinatra repeated. "I do." The man leaned forward. "You're making enemies over pride." Sinatra stood, slowly. "No, I'm drawing a line over respect." The man studied him for a long moment. "Then you should understand what happens next." Sinatra met his gaze without blinking. "I already do." The man left without another word. Sammy broke the silence. "That felt different." Sinatra nodded. "Because that was the last warning." Sammy swallowed. "So what's the plan?" Sinatra poured himself another drink, letting the ice settle. "Now we let them think they've won." Sammy frowned. "Won what?" Sinatra smiled faintly. "Control." The next night would be quieter. Sinatra made sure of it. He laughed more, joked longer, gave no indication that anything was wrong. Sammy followed his lead. The room relaxed. People assumed the tension had passed. That was exactly what Sinatra wanted, because real endings didn't come with noise. They came with realization. And Sinatra was done waiting. The final night didn't announce itself. That was the first thing Sinatra noticed. No tension at the door, no nervous energy in the halls, no hurried whispers behind his back. The Sands felt almost relaxed, as if the city itself had decided the problem was over. That was always the most dangerous moment, when people believed they had already won. Sinatra arrived early again, but this time he didn't linger. He walked straight through the backstage corridors, greeting people by name, smiling just enough to make them uncomfortable. Sammy followed a step behind, watching faces shift as Sinatra passed. Some people nodded respectfully. Others avoided eye contact altogether. "They think it's done," Sammy whispered. Sinatra nodded. "That's because it is." Sammy frowned. "Doesn't feel done." Sinatra stopped walking and turned to him. "That's because you're still inside it. I'm already past it." They took their places. The show began exactly on time. The band played smoothly. The audience responded warmly. From the outside, it was a perfect night, the kind that never made headlines. Sinatra performed effortlessly, but his eyes kept drifting to the same place, a table just off to the side of the room where several familiar faces sat together, not laughing, not applauding too loudly, watching. Midway through the set, Sinatra made a choice. It wasn't on the schedule. It wasn't discussed. It wasn't announced. He altered the order. When the band finished the song, Sinatra stepped forward and spoke into the microphone. His tone was casual, almost playful. "You know," he said, "Vegas is a funny place, full of surprises. Sometimes the best ones come from people who don't get enough room." There was polite laughter. Sinatra didn't wait for it to settle. "Sammy," he said, turning slightly, "come on out here." The room shifted, just slightly, enough for Sinatra to feel it. Sammy froze for half a second. He hadn't been scheduled yet. He looked at Sinatra, searching his face. Sinatra nodded once. Sammy stepped onto the stage. The applause was immediate, louder than it had been all night. Sinatra stood beside him, not in front, not behind, exactly where he needed to be. Equal space, equal light. "This man," Sinatra continued, "has carried rooms bigger than this with nothing but timing and courage. And tonight, I thought he deserved the space he earned. No accusations, no explanations, just recognition." Sammy leaned into the microphone, his voice steady but quiet. "Thank you, Frank." Sinatra smiled. "Always." From the corner of his eye, Sinatra saw movement at the table. One man shifted in his seat. Another leaned back, arms crossed. They understood immediately what had happened. Sinatra hadn't confronted them. He hadn't embarrassed them. He had done something far worse. He had made them irrelevant. The rest of the show unfolded naturally. Sammy performed longer than planned. The audience loved it. Sinatra watched the room carefully. No one interrupted. No one objected. The people who once moved schedules now sat still, trapped by their own need to remain invisible. After the curtain fell, backstage was quiet. Not tense, quiet. A different kind of silence. The kind that came after a decision had been accepted, even if it wasn't liked. Sammy closed the dressing room door behind them. That was it? Sinatra loosened his tie. That was everything. Sammy shook his head slowly. "You didn't call anyone out. You didn't say a word about what they did." Sinatra poured himself a drink. "I didn't need to." "So what happens now?" Sinatra looked up. "Now nobody ever tries it again." There was a knock at the door. Sinatra didn't delay this time. The door opened to reveal the same man who had issued the warnings days earlier. He looked tired now, older. "Frank," he said, quietly. Sinatra gestured to the chair. "Sit." The man did. He exhaled. "You made your point." Sinatra nodded. "I did." The man hesitated. "You could have handled this differently." Sinatra smiled faintly. "I know." "And you chose this." "Yes." The man looked down. "No one's gonna touch him again." Sinatra raised an eyebrow. "They never should have." The man stood. "Vegas remembers moments like this." Sinatra met his eyes. "So do I." After he left, Sammy sat down heavily. "You ever get tired of carrying rooms like that?" Sinatra thought for a moment. "Only when I don't have to." Sammy laughed softly. "You didn't just protect me, you know." Sinatra glanced at him. "I protected the room."
They left the sands together that night. No crowds followed them, no headlines were written. The city moved on, as it always did, but backstage, something fundamental had shifted. Sammy paused outside. "You know," he said, "most people would have made that about power." Sinatra smiled. "Power's loud, respect's quiet." Sammy nodded. "Guess that's why they never saw it coming." Sinatra adjusted his jacket. They were listening for noise. And that was the end of it. No apology ever came, no explanation was offered. No one dared rearrange the room again. Because sometimes the strongest move isn't confrontation, it's presence. And sometimes the most important loyalty test isn't passed with words, but with timing.